back.
Mr. Chairman, just point of inquiry. What was the last image we saw that you put up? Where did that come from? I just want to authenticate that.
This is the Ways and Means Committee Exhibit 300.
Must be the Irish whistleblower note. All right. Not an inquiry, though. Anyway, Chair recognizes Ms. Stansbury for the last question.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to the GOP's day-long campaign for Donald Trump. I want to start with Mr. Galanis to help connect some dots that have not yet been connected in this hearing. Mr. Galanis, you are serving just under 16 years for, among other things, as was been said today, defrauding a tribal nation and specifically a tribal corporation held by the Ogallala Sioux, which is why you are testifying from a prison today. But I'd like to ask you, Mr. Galanis, have you had an attorney representing you before this committee that you retained last December? And that attorney's name is Mr. Mark Paoletta, correct?
That's correct.
And when you first testified before this committee in a taped interview, you were actually stopped by Mr. Paoletta from answering just a simple question about how you met him and who exactly was paying your legal fees. Now, I want to make sure that the American people understand exactly who Mr. Paoletta is, because he is, in fact, a former lawyer to Donald Trump, who served in the administration in the Office of Management and Budget, and was at the center of the Ukrainian pressure campaign for which Donald Trump was impeached. And in fact, Mr. Paoletta was Trump's chief OMB lawyer when he withheld aid to Ukraine to try to extort the Ukrainian government into investigating Joe Biden to support Donald Trump's campaign. And Mr. Paoletta literally wrote the memo to help withhold those funds. Now, I want to dig in a little bit on this pressure campaign, and Mr. Lev Parnas is here to discuss as an eyewitness who was there. Mr. Parnas, we appreciate you being here, and I want to move through this quickly, so just ask for simple yes and no answers. You've testified here today that Donald Trump repeatedly asked you, and through Rudy Giuliani, to put pressure on the Ukrainian government to dig up dirt on Joe Biden to support Trump's campaign, correct?
100% yes.
And as we can see here in this picture, you were very much a business associate of Rudy Giuliani during this time. And as established in your testimony, you traveled to and met with Ukrainian officials and told them that the White House would withhold its support and aid to Ukraine if it did not cooperate with this bribery, essentially.
That's correct.
And as we all know, Donald Trump's administration, and specifically the Office of Management and Budget, did withhold that foreign aid in 2019. And here's the guy who did it. And he's representing the witness who's literally on Zoom with us for this committee today. And it's the reason why Donald Trump was impeached the first time. And the man at the center of that scheme is involved in the House GOP's inquiry. But I also want to point out that Mr. Paoletta is also involved in and very much in bed with the Thomases. In fact, he represented Miss Ginny Thomas, Clarence Thomas's wife, in her involvement in the Stop the Steal before the January 6th committee, and actually also goes on vacation with Mr. Harlan Crow and the Thomases. So this man has quite an interesting roster and participation in this hearing. But the bigger picture here is that Mr. Paoletta's presence is yet another indication of the way in which this hearing and this impeachment inquiry is part of Donald Trump's larger misinformation campaign, just like it was in 2020, where in addition to pressuring and withholding aid to Ukraine, Rudy Giuliani and the Trump Organization, as Mr. Parnas has established, planted the story in the media. And now here we are 4 years later, as they've dredged it back up and are planting it back in the media, using Congress, using this committee, and using a baseless impeachment supported by Donald Trump's own allies on this committee to push that information out. As members on this committee have trafficked in false evidence that was planted by a Russian operative to the FBI and is now in jail for that. All of this is in the service of propping up the criminal enterprise for which Donald Trump is at the top and has already been twice impeached. Rudy Giuliani and others have been exposed as they continue to traffic in Russian disinformation that not only props up Donald Trump, but it props up Vladimir Putin himself and his goals back in Russia and in Ukraine. So I just want to point out here that once again, as I said when we had a false impeachment hearing a few months ago, that once again we see the
Time's
long
expired.
arm,
Gentlelady's time's
the
expired.
little hands of Donald Trump all over this hearing.
And just want to state